Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and welcome to the Stewards room, where we'll be taking a look at racing incidents submitted by you guys and trying to make a determination on who, if anyone, was at fault. There's a link in the description to submit your own clips, and feel free to check out the playlist link for more of these videos, specifically the first, which acts as a scene setter. Also, keep an eye out for cards popping up on screen towards the end of each segment where you can vote on who you thought was at fault for each incident. Okay, so for the first time, we're going to be including some real life clips for this series. Now, I can't show them in full speed, but in all of the ways, this is as fair use as it could possibly be. So hopefully we're all right with that. But I think, throughout the course of a Formula One season or any other real world motorsport, there's always some interesting clips that we can look at. And although there weren't exactly too many controversial moments during the Australian Grand Prix this year, there's going to be plenty of controversial moments throughout the course of the season, both for Formula 1. We're going to see a Formula E clip next, which was a little bit more controversial than this. And throughout the course of the season, I do want to bring in some of these a couple of days after each of the races and intersperse them with the clips that you guys are submitting as well. So as always, we've got our 4 regular clips. Now, for this one, we're talking about bad braking. And obviously, for this incident, it's pretty clear what happens. We see Kvyat try to go up the inside, and basically it's a bit of a dive bomb that essentially doesn't pay off. And the reason I wanted to show this is obviously to introduce the idea of using some real life motorsport clips in this series, but also the idea of a dive bomb that we've talked about in the past. And if any incident had happened at this point, it would have been entirely the fault of Kvyat because he went in too deep and too quickly into the corner. Now, thankfully, that there was no incident. Stroll was just ahead here, as we can see, and he notices that he's there, gives him the space, when really he didn't have to, because he was coming at such a speed that, yes, you could say that he took the line away from the inside, but obviously, as we saw from the rules of racing document, which we'll look at, it does specifically say that you can't be doing that by carrying too much speed into the corner. So here we are with the usual rules of racing document, and we'll go down to overtaking someone up the inside and disputes over the apex. As it always says, it's generally accepted that the attacker must be at least halfway alongside the defender when they reach the apex to have a reasonable claim to this piece of track. Moreover, the attacker should not have achieved this position by carrying too much speed into the corner. This method is called dive bombing. So it's all well and good, attacking. If the attacker's more than halfway alongside, he has the rights to the racing line, and it's up to the defender to, back out of that, or any collision is the fault of the defender. But if the attacker has carried way too much speed into the corner to gain that position, that is not allowed, and then it would be the fault of the attacker if any incident occurs. And that is exactly what's happened here. Kvyat takes too much speed into the corner. Thankfully, there isn't a collision, but if there was, it would have been his fault simply because he took too much speed into it. And you can see that quite easily that he took too much speed into the corner, because if he hadn't have done, he wouldn't have been off in the gravel on the left-hand side of the track there. So that's always something to keep in mind. There obviously wasn't an incident here, and I'm not going to put up a poll actually to vote on this one because nothing really happened in terms of an incident, but it's just to give you an idea that we've talked about dive bombs in the past, and this is a perfect example of, in some situations when a dive bomb happens, it's difficult to know quite why that was wrong when you see someone maybe hit someone on the inside or just hit the person on the outside and get away with it. And as long as there's no contact, if you do a dive bomb successfully, then that's fine. But if you carry so much speed into the corner that you would have gone off the track had a person not been there to hit into, that's when it becomes a problem. So hopefully you're liking the idea of seeing some real world motorsport clips. Hopefully this video stays up and it's all fine. But we're on to our second clip now. It's another one from the Formula E race in Hong Kong that was a few weeks ago. And it's a battle for the lead. Coming down, it's a very difficult place to pass as well. We've got Lotterer right in front. We're racing along from the perspective of Bird. Lotterer basically defends the middle of the track, which he's totally fine to do, but Bird basically misjudges his braking and goes into the back of Lotterer's tyre there. Now, on first sight, that doesn't seem like it's much of a big deal. If these hadn't been open wheel vehicles at the back there, it would have just been a little bump and nothing really would have happened. Lotterer managed to make the corner anyway, and they were able to continue. But further along in the race, Lotterer ends up getting a puncture from that. It's only a few corners further, and loses the lead of the race because of it. So he gets a puncture, and Bird is able to take advantage of that, goes into the lead, and goes on to win the race. And the puncture was caused by that incident. Lotterer ends up losing the race and dropping right out of it. So coming back to the document, we got entering the braking zone, where it says, on a straight, a defending driver has the right to suddenly change direction, even using the entire width of the track if they are fully ahead of the attacking driver. The same right does not apply in or immediately before the braking zone for a corner. Sudden changes of direction just before or within the braking zone are considered extremely dangerous, as they can leave the attacking driver nowhere to go. Now, we didn't see that in the clip that we just saw. Lotterer moved over to the inside of the track, which is perfectly liable to do, as we saw also from the one move rule, where as long as you're completely ahead of another driver on a straight, you are permitted to make a move in one direction, and as long as you're not weaving about the track, you're okay. So he did that move, then entering the braking zone, he didn't move at all beyond that, and basically it was just a misjudgment of braking from Sam Bird, who was in second place. But in these situations, it's always on the person who's behind to get a move done properly and not run into the back of somebody else. Even in something like Formula E, where they're lifting off the throttle earlier in the corner to save energy and get through the race, it's still, the onus is still on the person who's behind you to basically not crash into the back of you. And like I said, if this was closed wheel racing, there might have been a little bump. Both would have gotten away with it, as long as there was no advantage gained from, and that's ultimately the big deal with this, because somebody did leave a comment previously asking, do you punish the incident or do you punish what happens after it? And you have to take into account what happens after it. You look at this and yeah, it's a little bit of a bump, but at first sight it looks like they get away with it. Second place doesn't gain first place from the crash, at least immediately. But then the consequences of that crash become apparent further around the lap. A puncture happens, and then a big advantage is gained from that crash and from that contact, because second place was then able to go on and win the race. And that's what it's all about when it comes to determining fault and whether penalties should be given for bits of contact. It's the effect that contact has, and whether any advantage is gained from the contact that we just saw. And obviously that's exactly what happened. A big advantage was gained from the contact. Like I said, if they'd been able to get away with it, nothing would have happened. But because a big advantage was gained and second place was then able to go on and win the race, because he essentially, damaged the car in front of him, then he's at fault for this one and is deserving of a penalty. And that's exactly what happened in the race. He got a penalty, lost the win of the race, and neither of them were able to win. And it's obviously a shame, but it's just a misjudgment in the braking zone and some bad braking to just run into someone like that. But obviously, as always, well, I didn't do it for the first clip, but we'll bring them back in for this one. There is a poll in the top right hand corner of the screen that will pop up in a card. You'll be able to vote on who you thought was at fault for this incident. Was it the driver behind or the driver in front? And let me know down in the comments whether you're enjoying seeing these real world motorsport clips in these videos. But now we'll move on to some classic gaming racing clips to decide on. So with this one, we're on GTA, and it's a bit of a cluster of crashes essentially. Now, for this one, we kind of have to look at it and pick it apart to determine whose fault it was. So we're coming along here, and really what it is, again, we've been talking about bad braking. It's bad braking, or bad anticipation at least, from this car right here. So I'll slow it down as well. But what you'll see basically is that the car behind misjudges the speed that people in front are going, and like we've just seen, runs into the back of the car in front. We just saw that in the previous clip where we had someone run into the back of someone else, and it's always on your fault if you're the person behind, unless someone is in front and brake checking you or braking in a random place where they wouldn't normally. Beyond those situations, it's always the person behind who's at fault for that. So he gets into the back of the person who we're riding with, And it's not too big of a deal, manages to save it, which is pretty decent, gets the car turned around and is able to keep going. But then, unfortunately, we just see a small hit to there caused by this, contact, and that takes out the white car in front. And that's not on the fault of the blue car who we're riding with. That's actually on the fault of the black and yellow car behind. He's the one who caused this incident in the first place. So in this kind of situation, if you're talking about whether you should wait for drivers who you take out and give them their position back, it's the black and yellow car that should be waiting and giving a position back to the white car. The blue car who we're riding with is essentially just an innocent bystander in that it wasn't his fault that crash happened. So, you got to be careful about giving blame to people. Essentially, the white car in front, from his perspective, probably would have thought that the blue car just took him out completely, but there was nothing he could do. He was taken out himself, and it was just a bit of a cluster of crashes that caused the white car to be spun around, and it was all caused by the black and yellow car basically not misjudging his braking and getting into the back of the blue car. So that was entirely on, at least from my perspective, the black and yellow car. But obviously, as always, you can vote in the top right in the poll that'll pop up on the screen. Was it the blue car's fault? Was it the black and yellow car's fault? Was it the white car's fault for whatever reason? I don't know why. But for me, at least, I certainly think that we saw two innocent bystanders with this, and it was on any kind of penalty or fault would be on the car that originally caused this mess, and that was the person who got into the back of the blue car in the first place. So, final clip, and it is an interesting one. We're on, I believe it's Project Cars 2, and interesting. This is exactly what I was saying about when cars are like this, closed wheel racing, you can certainly get away with a lot more contact than what you can on open wheel racing, but the consequences still matter. So if you can go into the back of someone and nobody has any issues from it, fair enough, you get away with it, it's okay. But if that doesn't happen, as we've seen here, then you're going to have a problem. So this, first of all, we see a fairly decent overtake up the inside from the car on the right. He gets the move done to get up into what is the lead at that point. But then we also see, if you focus in this section, that someone comes into the back of our perspective as the yellow car. So he's already, this car on the right, that the Monster Energy car, has already kind of shown that his braking is a little bit off because he went so deep into that corner that we've just experienced. And the same thing basically happens on this corner. He goes a little bit too deep on the brakes, goes into the back of the orange car, and then again another bit of a cluster of crashes. And essentially it's all caused by that black and green car. So let's slow it down. And again, this is exactly what I've been saying. It's all about this episode's all about bad braking and misjudging your braking. And that's exactly what the black and yellow car does just in front of us. In the heat of battle, obviously you're trying to brake later than the person who you're going up against to try and get an extra position, but you can't, like I said, just go into the back of someone. Now, if nothing had happened, they probably would have all gotten away with this and you wouldn't put any fault to anyone, but that's not what happens. There is consequences to going into the back of someone in this case, and we have to assign blame to the person who was legitimately at fault for causing those consequences in the first place. So we see that we're all braking as much as we can. Maybe it's just that the car doesn't have as good brakes, but maybe he's not braking quite well enough, because he clearly runs into the back, as you can see there, runs into the back of the orange car. Now again, not too big of a deal as long as everybody gets through, and to be fair, those two do. But we can see that he's carrying so much speed that even though he's hit into the back of the orange car, he's still going quite far beyond the apex. Realistically, he should be going in this direction. around the corner, but he's not. He's still going in that direction, which is not where he should be. So we've got two cars that are, trying their best to get around the corner, even though it's not the optimal line. They're still quite outside. They're trying their best to get around the corner, but what ends up happening is that the car in front of us can't do that because the black and green car has steamed in at such a high pace. So it goes right down the inside. The black and green car, obviously, as you can see there, a little bit of a hit on the black and white car, which knocks him. Again, everybody's way too far out wide for this corner, but certainly not going, you can even see it if you're pausing it here. The corner's going around here, and the direction that these cars are moving in is not the way that they should be for the corner. So something's up. And then, to be fair to the yellow car who we're riding with, if you look at the brake lights, he's off the brakes, and then when he sees that something is going on and these cars aren't going to get around the corner, he does put the brakes on again, but it's not, there's only so much you can do. It's not quick enough, and there's not enough time to be able to stop in time, and he runs into the back of the black and white car, sending him spinning around. Now, for me, that was entirely caused by second place man, the black and green Monster Energy car that we just saw. That was entirely caused by him going far too deep into the corner and basically causing a cluster of crashes because of that, because of his bad braking and his misjudgment of his braking, you could say. He just ends up going into the back of one car, flies into the side of another car. You've got to realise that the black and white car that's in front of us that ends up, having the worst time of this, he wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for the black and green car. He would be making the corner totally fine. And this is something that you've also got to consider when you're on the inside of the track. You have to brake earlier because that's the whole point of a racing line. And if you don't get the idea of a racing line or anything like that, check out the Racing School series, which I went over in episode 1. But the whole idea of a racing line is that you don't need to brake as much when you're on the outside because you can carry more speed around the corner because the line that you're taking is a much less of a angle. But when you're on the inside, you're taking the angle that you're making the corner is much tighter, so you have to brake more to be able to make the corner. And obviously, maybe it's just a misjudgment, but that doesn't happen, and we see that he goes into the back of the orange car and can't make the corner in the first place, so goes into the side of a car that is trying to make the corner, and to be fair, would have made the corner. And without that incident that we've just seen, the yellow car wouldn't have even had any issue and wouldn't have gone into the black and white car, causing the crash. So I don't think you can put any blame on the yellow car who we are racing with for the fault of the black and white car that got taken out. He what could he do? He braked when he at the moment that he could, when he saw that something was happening, but you can't anticipate that someone's just going to take someone off the track like that. Whether you call this just a racing incident, just one of those things, then that's obviously up to you. But for me, I think there was enough blame there, and we've already seen it, on the first on the first corner, that the black and yellow car is a little bit ambitious with his braking because he goes into the back of the yellow car here. I think there's enough blame there, and enough. None of this would have happened, what you got to take into account. None of this would have happened if it wasn't for the black and yellow car. If he'd braked at a normal place and not gone into the back or the side of any other car, they would have all made it through fine. So for me, you could say that it was a racing incident, and that, to play devil's advocate, say the black and white car on the outside should have noticed that people were there and left more space. But for me, he left plenty of space in the first place. There's so much space on the inside of the track. How much more space do you want him to leave? So again, there will be a poll in the top right. Feel free to vote on it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I think this is one of the more difficult ones to unpack. Let me know your thoughts, obviously. But for me personally, I would put the fault on the black and green car there. Certainly not the yellow car's fault for the takeout, but I'll put all the options there. I'll even put the orange car in the poll just for whatever reason, even though he didn't do anything in this. But yeah, racing incident. Was it racing incident no one's fault really? Or was it all of their faults? Or was it one car in particular? Feel free to vote on the poll. Let me know in the comments down below as well. Now, you can find in the video description all the info and links that you may need to submit your own clips, and if you'd like to support me, you can do so on Patreon by becoming a YouTube member or simply subscribing and liking the video. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.